Time now for Eye on Africa, the headlines. European oil companies in the spotlight as a new report lifts the lid on toxic fuels being sold in Africa. Elsewhere, 1 year on from the failed coup, Burkina Faso remembers the violence and prepares to try some of those accused over it. And we head to Lesotho for a taste of one of the country's best-loved social occasions, a day at the races. Start with troubling allegations about European oil firms selling toxic fuels across Africa. Those charges made in a new report from the Swiss NGO Public Eye. It documents companies and commodity traders, often based in Switzerland, taking crude oil from African nations, turning it into cheap diesel with toxin levels banned in Europe, and then selling it back to the very countries it came from. Paper says no laws are being broken, but that those involved are using an illegitimate strategy to boost profits. For more, I'm joined from Zurich by Andreas Misbach, who's a Joint Managing Director at Public Eye. Thanks very much for talking to us. Which companies are you accusing here?
Well, we focus most of it at the companies that have petrol stations in Africa, the Swiss traders. It's like Trafigura, Vitol, and the Adax and Oryx group. But in the bulk sale of toxic fuels to Africa, there are also Mercuria, Glencore, Gunvor, and Litasco, all Swiss traders.
And what exactly are you accusing them of? How does this process work?
Well, we have actually taken samples at petrol stations in Africa, and we found sulfur levels up to 400 times what is allowed in Europe. Also other levels of toxic substances such as benzene and polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. And those fuels are not only sold in Africa, they're actually deliberately produced to meet the weak African standards. So the so-called African quality, as the industry calls it, is deliberately produced and is poisoning Africa.
How dangerous are these fuels? You're talking about poisoning there.
Well, they massively increase the air pollution in Africa, which is already a big problem. Air pollution in cities like Accra, Dakar, Lagos is bigger than in Beijing. And sulfur is not only directly increasing the emissions of particulate matter and sulfur dioxide, it's also destroying emission technologies. So they the air quality, which is harming people right now without getting sulfur out of fuels.
As you say in the report, none of this, however, is illegal.
That's true, and it's legal because the standards of the African countries are outdated. But the UN guiding principles on business and human rights are very clear in that. It's not enough today for a company to respect the laws of a country if the laws don't protect the rights of people. And those outdated standards clearly don't protect the right to health of the African urban population. And this is why we're calling on the companies to stop selling toxic fuels to Africa.
Andreas Misbach, thanks very much for talking to us.
You're welcome.
One of the countries in that Swiss report that cites as being affected is Ivory Coast. More from there now with our correspondent Arnaud Froger.
The outcome of this study is hardly a surprise in Côte d'Ivoire. People are used to high level of air pollution because of intense traffic, especially here in Abidjan. The real news, though, is that we now know for a fact that it mainly comes from the fuel itself, and not only from the old cars. The diesel sold at the pump in Côte d'Ivoire is 350 times more concentrated in sulfur than in Europe. So it's very toxic indeed, but it does meet the national standard. That's why the Ivorian government needs to take action, according to the local NGO involved in the study.
We
are asking the government to reconsider its policy so that the levels of sulfur, the level of toxic substances may be reduced to match international standards, whether European or American.
The Ivorian refining company, providing 40% of the domestic fuel, is looking into this matter. Getting closer to the European standard would only cost 3 euro cents per liter, and it could also save lives, as if nothing changes. 30,000 people living here in Africa are expected to die of air pollution by 2030.
Arnaud Froger reporting there. So Burkina Faso next, and this Friday marks 1 year since the failed coup led by forces loyal to former President Blaise Compaoré. The country is still dealing with the fallout, with dozens of soldiers accused of involvement due to stand trial in January. Laurent Berstachet has more.
A ceremony to commemorate the victims of Burkina Faso's failed coup. Several government officials were present to pay tribute to those who died fighting the putsch exactly 1 year after the events that rocked the country to its core.
We came here to express the government's solidarity. The country will never forget their ultimate sacrifice to defend our liberty, our democracy, and the Burkinabe people.
The ceremony was boycotted by several families of victims who denounced the inaction of officials during the coup.
We didn't see them or their children in the streets, but us, we risked our lives every day.
1 year ago, on September 16th, soldiers loyal to ousted President Blaise Compaoré stormed the presidential palace, taking head of state Michel Cafondo and his prime minister Isaac Zida hostage. The next day, their leader, General Gilbert Diendéré, officially seized power, but a branch of the army still loyal to the president pushed the rebels back, and a week later, Cafondo and Zida were reinstated. According to AFP, Isaac Zida was now wanted in Burkina Faso and could be charged with desertion in time of peace and refusal to obey orders. He's gone off the radar since leaving for Canada in January and hasn't replied to multiple summons by the president.
Now, the UN's refugee agency says the number of people fleeing the conflict in South Sudan has now topped 1 million. Fighting there erupted at the end of 2013 between soldiers loyal to President Salva Kiir and those backing his former deputy Riek Machar. The peace deal signed in 2015 has proved shaky, with renewed clashes in July raising fears the five-year-old nation could slide back into civil war. Neighbouring Uganda has reported some 20,000 new arrivals in the past week alone.
The number of South Sudanese refugees sheltering in neighbouring countries has passed the 1 million mark, including more than 185,000 people who have fled since fresh violence erupted in South Sudan, in Juba, on July the 8th. 5 years after independence, this is a very sad milestone, and we again call on all the actors involved to step up efforts for to forge a durable peace pact so that people can start rebuilding their lives and returning home.
Meanwhile, the UN's Food Agency has warned that the El Nino warm weather phenomenon is having a devastating impact on southern Africa. Parts of Zimbabwe, Malawi, Zambia, South Africa, Mozambique and Botswana have already seen their driest rainy season in 35 years. Much of the region has experienced delays in crop planting and poor conditions for crop growth. Madagascar, which is struggling with its third consecutive year of drought, is particularly badly affected. Protesters in Kenya have been voicing their anger against a proposed railway line as part of a major project to improve the country's network. But the fact it's set to pass through the Nairobi National Park has had conservationists up in arms. The country's Wildlife Service has approved the scheme, saying flora and fauna are not under threat. It's now awaiting the green light from environmental authorities. Finally, jockeys wearing wool balaclavas and a scruffy old helmet urging their horses through the rough grasslands. Ascot or Longchamp it isn't, but horse racing in the mountain kingdom of Lesotho is still a major social occasion.
At 16 years old, Madikeng is one of the best jockeys in Lesotho. It's the eve of an important race, and the young shepherd can see himself finishing first.
I will be very excited if I win and very proud, because I will have won a professional race in front of everyone, all the horse owners.
Across the mountain kingdom of Lesotho, people use horses and donkeys to get around. Horse races are a way to celebrate the kingdom's culture, attracting hundreds of spectators. 5 races are organised to mark the king's birthday. Owners parade their mounts in front of the crowd and the betting gets underway. It's now Madikeng's turn to compete, finishing 4th, just enough to save his honour.
All the horses were very good. During training, my horse got injured, so didn't train him very fast. So next time, if no injury, we'll be fine.
The day's winner is a horse called Talk-a-lot, a purebred that never loses.
It's because I train my horse very hard. I don't let it run, I keep him tight.
€1,000 is distributed as prize money, raised by the country's tourism board and local companies. These sponsors allow the tradition to flourish and hope to raise the sport to a professional level.
The future of the horses of Lesotho comes out of these races, where all your breeders and horse owners can analyze and look at the different horses and decide how they want to take their horses forward.
Mudikeng has ridden for a number of owners, winning a total of €50, the equivalent to 5 days' work. One day he hopes to own his own horses, to continue the tradition and make himself rich.
That's it for Eye on Africa. Thanks for watching, and do stay with us here on France 24.
You love watching France 24 in English.
Analysis from France 24. I'm Mark Owen. These are the main world news.
To the border with Algeria.
Huge lines since this morning to answer that question.
But France 24 is also available in French.
14h à Paris, bonjour à tous, bienvenue si vous nous rejoignez sur France 24 Paris.
And Arabic.
شعبية هذا الباب القادم من أمريكا الجنوبية في ازدياد.
Also coming up.
Featured on cable and satellite systems and online media in France and across the world.